he asked human Marine. Her kill count. She said, this year or just this planet. Before the aliens strike like this video if you know Earth doesn't go down easy. Enjoy the story. The transport shuttle's engines hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced alien technology as it approached Alpha 9, the most prestigious military coordination facility in known space. Through the viewport, the massive station gleamed against the starfield, a testament to centuries of galactic cooperation between dozens of species. What emerged from the shuttle's cargo bay wasn't what anyone expected. Sergeant Maia Voss stepped onto the docking platform with the measured gait of someone who belonged exactly where she was, despite every visual cue suggesting otherwise. At 158 centimeters, she was smaller than most species' children, her frame, compact and economical in the way that suggested functionality over intimidation. Her uniform bore patches that no one in the galaxy recognized, symbols that seemed deceptively simple, yet carried an authority that made veteran soldiers unconsciously step aside. Her equipment consisted of nothing more impressive than a standard field pack that had seen considerable use and what appeared to be a paper notebook, its edges worn from constant handling. The receiving officer, a towering Rexian whose species had conquered 3 sectors before breakfast was typically considered routine, looked down at his manifest with visible confusion. His 4 eyes, each evolved for different spectrums of light, scanned the minimal documentation repeatedly, as if hoping additional details would materialize through sheer force of will. The bureaucratic machinery of galactic civilization had processed thousands of diplomatic observers, military attachés, and cultural liaisons, but this entry seemed almost deliberately sparse. "Tactical observer," he muttered, his 4 eyes scanning the minimal documentation. "From Earth." "That's right," Maia replied, her voice carrying the kind of calm confidence that suggested she'd never encountered a problem she couldn't handle. "I'm here for the joint tactical assessment." The Vrexian's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You're the human representative. One of them." Maia shouldered her pack with practiced ease. "Though I think I'm the only one they could spare for observer duty." Around the docking bay, various alien species went about their business. Jovarex engineers with their distinctive scaled skin monitoring atmospheric processors, Thaian analysts whose crystalline bodies refracted the station's lights into prismatic patterns, while calculating trajectory vectors, and Corvinite soldiers whose reputation for tactical brilliance was known throughout the galaxy as they supervised cargo transfers with military precision. None of them paid attention to the small human following the Vrexian toward the station's interior. Why would they? Earth was barely a footnote in galactic affairs, a recently discovered world whose species had only just figured out faster-than-light travel. In the central command hub, Lieutenant Jarn Vrex of the Juvrix military was reviewing tactical displays when the Vrexian escort announced the human observer's arrival. Jarn looked up from his holographic battle projections, his reptilian features arranging themselves into what humans might recognize as mild curiosity. "So this is what Earth sends to observe galactic military coordination," he said, his voice carrying the particular tone reserved for creatures that were probably harmless, but certainly irrelevant. Maia set her pack down beside an empty console and pulled out her paper notebook. "Earth sends whoever's available," she replied simply. "I happen to be between assignments." "Between assignments." Jarn's crest fluttered with barely contained amusement. "And what sort of assignments does Earth give its tactical observers?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a recently discharged weapon. Around the command hub, other officers began to take notice of the conversation, sensing the subtle shift in atmosphere that preceded either entertainment or disaster. Maia opened her notebook to a fresh page and looked up at Jarn with the kind of expression that suggested she was genuinely considering how to answer a perfectly reasonable question. "The usual sort," she said finally. "Observation, assessment, conflict resolution when necessary." The galaxy is about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is the one everyone ignores. Stay with us to see what happens when assumptions meet reality. The tactical briefing room buzzed with the controlled energy of professional military minds dissecting complex problems. Representatives from 12 different species surrounded the central holographic display, each bringing centuries of collective military experience to bear on the current crisis. The air itself seemed thick with tension and the weight of strategic decisions that would affect billions of lives across multiple star systems. The Outer Rim colonies were under threat from coordinated pirate attacks, and the traditional response protocols weren't working. Ships were being lost, colonies evacuated, and the Galactic Defense Consortium's reputation was taking damage with each failed engagement. "The problem," declared Commander Thex of the Bashkir military, his voice resonating through the chamber's acoustics, "is that these pirates are using hit-and-run tactics that exploit our standard defensive formations." Nods rippled around the table. The Bashkir were renowned tacticians whose strategies had ended 3 major wars through sheer intellectual superiority. "Our response times are acceptable," added Major Lix of the Corvinite forces. "But by the time we arrive in force, the attackers have vanished into hyperspace." Lieutenant Jarn leaned back in his chair, his scaled fingers drumming against the conference table. "What we need is a species willing to take losses to pin them down, someone expendable enough that we can use them as bait." His gaze swept the room and settled on Maia, who was quietly taking notes in her paper notebook, while the holographic display showed fleet movements and casualty reports. "Humans, for instance." Jarn continued his tone, carrying just enough mock consideration to make it clear he was enjoying himself. "Earth must have plenty of soldiers eager to prove themselves on the galactic stage." The room's atmosphere shifted slightly. Several officers turned to look at the human observer, curious to see how she would react to what was essentially a suggestion that her species serve as cannon fodder. Maia looked up from her notebook, her expression thoughtful rather than offended. "Earth has soldiers," she agreed mildly. "Whether they're eager to prove anything is another question." "Come now," Jarn pressed, warming to his subject. "Every emerging species wants to demonstrate their military capabilities. It's natural. Humans must have some impressive warriors, some heroes with notable achievements." He leaned forward, fixing Maia with what he probably considered a penetrating stare. "What about you, observer? Surely someone wouldn't send a complete novice to witness galactic military planning." "What's your combat record?" The question was asked with the casual cruelty of someone who expected to hear about minor skirmishes with pre-industrial rebels or perhaps some police action against civilian unrest. The kind of resume that would confirm everyone's assumptions about humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. Maia set down her pen and tilted her head slightly as if the question required careful consideration. "My combat record?" she repeated slowly. "Are you asking about this year or just this planet?" The silence that followed was the kind that happens when someone throws a stone into what they thought was a shallow pond and never hears it hit bottom. Jarn blinked. "I'm sorry, could you clarify that?" "Well," Maia said, her tone remaining conversational. "The numbers are different depending on how you want to count them. If we're talking about confirmed hostile eliminations this year, it's been relatively quiet, only about 800. She paused, consulting her notebook. "But if you want the total for this particular planet, and I'm assuming you mean Alpha 9's operational theater, not just the station itself, then we'd need to include the suppression actions from my last 3 rotations, which brings the count to around 3,000. The holographic display continued its gentle rotation, showing fleet positions and strategic assets, but no one was looking at it anymore. Every eye in the room was fixed on the small human who had just casually mentioned numbers that exceeded the lifetime achievements of most veteran soldiers. Commander Thex was the first to find his voice. 3,000 confirmed kills. Approximate, Maia corrected politely. Some of the remote actions are hard to verify, and Command is very particular about documentation standards. Major Lix leaned forward, her crystalline features refracting the briefing room's lights into prismatic patterns across the walls. 3,000 hostiles. she said carefully. In how long a period? Maia flipped through several pages of her notebook, her finger tracing lines of neat handwriting. This deployment cycle has been about 18 months, she said, though like I mentioned, it's been pretty quiet compared to some rotations. The Corvinite officer's reputation for tactical analysis was legendary throughout the galaxy. She had developed mathematical models that could predict battle outcomes with 97% accuracy. Those same analytical skills were now telling her that something didn't add up. 18 months, she repeated. That would average to about 5.5 hostiles per day, Maia supplied helpfully, though it's not really that consistent. Most of the action was concentrated in the first few months during the Kepler station situation. Lieutenant Jarn's crest had flattened against his skull, an involuntary stress response his species hadn't been able to evolve away. What exactly happened at Kepler station? For the first time since entering the briefing room, Maia's expression shifted slightly. Not to defensiveness or pride, but to something that might have been mild embarrassment. "Oh, that wasn't supposed to be a big operation," she said. Command classified it as a minor peacekeeping action. There was some kind of territorial dispute between mining companies that had gotten out of hand. "Mining companies," Commander Thex said flatly. "Right. Apparently they'd hired some private security contractors who weren't being very diplomatic about resource allocation. Local authorities requested assistance, so Earth sent a small team to help mediate." Major Lix accessed her personal database, searching for any records of incidents at Kepler station. What she found made her wish she hadn't looked. According to Consortium intelligence files, she said slowly, Kepler station reported a brief disturbance that was resolved with minimal casualties. The official report lists 7 injured and no fatalities. Maia nodded agreeably. That sounds about right for the civilian casualties. Command is very strict about protecting non-combatants. But you mentioned 3,000 hostiles. Oh, those weren't civilians. Maia's tone suggested this should have been obvious. Those were the security contractors and their associates. It turned out the mining dispute was actually a cover for a pretty extensive criminal network. Slavery weapons, trafficking, the usual unpleasant stuff. She closed her notebook and looked around the table at the increasingly stunned faces. We tried negotiation first, obviously. Earth's diplomatic protocols are very clear about exhausting peaceful options before moving to kinetic solutions. Kinetic solutions, Jarn repeated weakly. Military euphemism, Maia explained. Sorry, we pick up a lot of jargon. The point is, when it became clear that the criminals weren't interested in reasonable discussion, we had to escalate to direct action. Major Lix was staring at her database display, cross-referencing incident reports with casualty statistics. The consortium files show that the Kepler station disturbance lasted approximately 6 hours. That's right, pretty standard timeline for that type of operation. 3,000 hostile eliminations in 6 hours. Commander Thex was doing the mathematics in his head, and he didn't like the results. That's 8 per minute, assuming continuous engagement. Well, it wasn't just me, Maia said, and for the first time she sounded genuinely modest. Command sent a full team, 5 Marines total plus support staff. The silence that followed was the kind that happens when a group of predators suddenly realizes they're looking at something higher up the food chain. 5 Marines, Major Lix whispered. Right. Brooks was team leader. Torres handled heavy support, Chen managed communications and logistics, Martinez covered tactical assessment, and I was assigned to perimeter security and cleanup operations. Jarn found his voice again, though it had climbed several octaves. 5 humans eliminated 3,000 armed criminals in 6 hours. Approximately. Maia shrugged. Like I said, some of the remote eliminations are hard to verify. The criminals had spread their operations across several asteroid facilities, and once they realized we were there, some of them tried to run. We had to pursue scattered elements for about 4 hours after the primary engagement. She paused, consulting her notebook again. Actually, that reminds me. Brooks wanted me to mention that Earth is always looking for opportunities to improve interspecies cooperation. If the consortium ever needs assistance with similar situations, we'd be happy to provide consultation or direct support. The emergency session was called within an hour of the briefing's conclusion. Word had spread through Alpha 9's command structure with the speed of very bad news, carried by urgent whispers in corridors and encrypted messages that bypassed normal channels. Now, the station's senior leadership was gathered in the secure conference chamber reserved for crisis management, their faces bearing the universal expression of people who had just realized their assumptions about reality were fundamentally flawed. Fleet Admiral Korath of the Thaian Defense Force presided over the meeting, her crystalline form pulsing with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Around the table sat the sector's most experienced military commanders, each trying to process what they'd learned about humanity's apparent capabilities. "Let me understand this correctly." Admiral Korath said, her voice resonating through the chamber's acoustics with harmonics that suggested barely controlled stress. "We have a single human claiming to have personally eliminated 800 hostiles this year with career totals in the thousands." "That's correct, Admiral." Major Lix had spent the past hour verifying every detail she could access through consortium intelligence networks. Cross-referencing incident reports with locations and timeframes mentioned by the human observer, I found substantial supporting evidence. What kind of supporting evidence? 17 separate incidents across 9 star systems, all officially classified as minor peacekeeping actions or diplomatic interventions. In each case, criminal organizations or hostile forces were completely eliminated with minimal collateral damage and no reported human casualties. Commander Thex leaned forward. No human casualties at all. None reported. Major Lix's analysis continued. In fact, in several cases, the only indication that Earth forces were involved is the absence of expected resistance when consortium forces arrived to provide follow-up support. Lieutenant Jarn, who had remained silent since arriving at the emergency session, finally spoke up. "There's something else. I asked the human about her species' military training protocols." Every head turned toward him. "And she described standard combat preparation that assumes soldiers will regularly face odds of 50 to 1 or higher. She seemed surprised that other species would consider this unusual." Admiral Korath's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep red, a color that among her people indicated the approach of either violence or complete systemic breakdown. 50 to 1 odds as standard training parameters. The human seemed to think that was conservative. She mentioned that advanced training assumes much higher ratios. Major Lix accessed another database, this one containing psychological profiles and combat effectiveness ratings for various galactic species. If we assume human military effectiveness scales proportionally with these reported capabilities, she paused, staring at the results of her calculations. Major Admiral Korath prompted, "Admiral, if these reports are accurate, a single human soldier represents combat effectiveness equivalent to approximately 500 trained Bashkir warriors." The comparison hit the room like a physical blow. The Bashkir were considered among the galaxy's finest soldiers, with individual warriors capable of holding defensive positions against odds that would overwhelm most other species. "That can't be correct," Commander Thex protested. "No species could evolve that level of combat effectiveness naturally." "Perhaps," Major Lix said slowly, "they didn't evolve it naturally." The implications of that statement settled over the room like a toxic cloud. If humanity hadn't evolved their military capabilities through natural selection, then they had developed them artificially. And artificial development meant conscious choice, systematic planning, and deliberate optimization for warfare. Admiral Korath activated the chamber's secure communication system. "I want everything consortium intelligence has on Earth's military development population, statistics, and technological capabilities. Priority Alpha classification." While they waited for the data to arrive, the assembled officers sat in silence, each contemplating what it meant to discover that their understanding of the galactic power balance had been fundamentally flawed. The intelligence report arrived 20 minutes later, transmitted directly to Admiral Korath's personal display. She reviewed it quickly, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through several colors before settling on a deep purple that none of the other species had ever seen before. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "Earth's population is approximately 8 billion individuals. That's within normal parameters for a developed world," Commander Thex noted. "Their estimated military personnel number 200 million active and reserve forces." The room went very quiet. 200 million soldiers, Major Lix repeated. "If each individual possesses even a fraction of the capabilities demonstrated by their observer, we're not dealing with an emerging civilization," Admiral Korath concluded. "We're dealing with the largest and most effective military force in galactic history, and we've been treating them like a minor border state." The call came in at 0347 station time, bypassing normal communication protocols and routing directly to Admiral Korath's personal emergency channel. The timestamp itself was ominous. Earth Central Command clearly operated on schedules that didn't respect Galactic Standard Time Zone, suggesting a level of operational tempo that never truly rested. The sender identification showed only Earth Central Command, Priority Diplomatic, with security encryption layers that made consortium military codes look like children's puzzles. Admiral Korath activated the secure line from her private quarters, still processing the intelligence reports that had kept her awake for the past 6 hours. "This is Fleet Admiral Korath of the Thyan Defense Force. Admiral, this is General Patterson, Earth Central Command. I understand one of our people has been sharing information with your organization." The voice was calm, professional, and carried the kind of authority that suggested its owner was accustomed to being taken very seriously. Admiral Korath found herself unconsciously straightening, despite being alone in her quarters. "That would be accurate, General. Sergeant Voss has been quite illuminating. I imagine she has been." There was a pause, filled with what sounded like muffled conversation in the background. "Admiral, I'm going to be direct with you because time is a factor. How much of humanity's actual capabilities has Sergeant Voss revealed?" The question was asked in the tone of someone who already knew the answer would be problematic. She mentioned personal combat statistics and some details about recent operations, Admiral Korath said carefully. "Our analysis suggests these numbers represent significant military capabilities. Admiral Sergeant Voss is what we classify as a standard infantry marine. She represents the baseline for human military personnel, not the exception." Admiral Korath felt her bioluminescent patterns shift involuntarily to colors she didn't recognize. "General, our estimates suggest your species possesses military capabilities far exceeding anything in consortium records." "Your estimates are conservative." General Patterson's tone remained professionally neutral. "Admiral, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. Is the consortium planning any hostile action against Earth or Earth's interests?" "Absolutely not." The response was immediate and emphatic. "General, if anything, we're concerned about whether we've inadvertently offended Earth through our previous assessment errors." Assessment errors. Admiral Korath realized she was about to admit to what might be the most significant intelligence failure in galactic history. General Consortium records classified Earth as a minor emerging civilization with limited military capabilities. Our preliminary membership evaluation, we rejected Earth's application for Consortium membership based on insufficient military contribution potential. The silence that followed lasted long enough for Admiral Korath to wonder if the connection had been severed. "General, are you still there?" "I'm here, Admiral. I'm just processing the fact that the galaxy's primary military alliance rejected Earth's membership because you thought we couldn't contribute effectively to galactic defense." Yes, that's an accurate summary. "Admiral, are you familiar with Earth's current military deployment status?" "Our intelligence files show minimal off-world presence. A few exploration vessels, some merchant marine activity, nothing that would indicate significant military operations. Admiral Earth currently has approximately 90,000 military vessels deployed throughout galactic space, with primary combat strength concentrated in 30,000 frontline ships. Most of our forces are assigned to exploration and colonization security, but we maintain rapid response capabilities for emerging threats. Admiral Korath's quarters seem to tilt slightly. The entire consortium military consisted of fewer than 3,000 ships scattered across dozens of systems. 90,000 vessels, she repeated faintly. That's current deployment, Admiral. Our total military production capacity is classified, but I can tell you that if we needed to achieve full war footing, those numbers would increase substantially. General, I need to ask, why hasn't Earth made its military capabilities known? Why allow the consortium to maintain incorrect assessments? Because Admiral Earth's experience with species that feel threatened by superior military power has not been positive. We've found it's generally better to be underestimated than to accidentally trigger defensive wars because potential allies are afraid of us. The explanation was so reasonable and so terrifying that Admiral Korath found herself unable to respond immediately. Admiral, General Patterson continued, Earth has been monitoring consortium space for several years. We're aware of the increasing piracy rates, the territorial disputes, and the declining effectiveness of consortium response protocols. We've been hoping you would request assistance, but our diplomatic channels suggested that direct offers of military aid might be misinterpreted as aggressive expansionism. So you sent Sergeant Voss to... We sent Sergeant Voss to observe consortium tactical capabilities and assess whether you might be receptive to closer military cooperation. Her tendency to be forthcoming about operational details wasn't anticipated, but it may have accelerated a conversation that needed to happen. Admiral Korath accessed her personal database, pulling up every incident report, territorial dispute, and security crisis from the past 3 years. With the new context of Earth's actual capabilities, patterns began to emerge that she had never noticed before. General, there have been 17 separate incidents where criminal organizations or hostile forces were eliminated with unusual efficiency and minimal collateral damage. Were those Earth operations? Yes, we've been providing quiet assistance where consortium forces were overwhelmed or where civilian populations were at immediate risk. Our rules of engagement for unilateral intervention are very strict, but we do act when necessary, without taking credit or requesting compensation. Admiral Earth doesn't need credit for doing what we consider basic galactic citizenship. And as for compensation, General Patterson paused. A galaxy where children can explore and discover without running into slavers or pirates every few systems is its own reward. The Emergency Consortium Assembly was called for 1,200 hours station time, bringing together military leaders from across known space via quantum communication links that hummed with the energy of civilizations trying to understand their suddenly precarious position. The main conference chamber of Alpha 9 had been reconfigured to accommodate representatives from 47 different species, each trying to process the fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics while maintaining the diplomatic composure their positions demanded. Admiral Korath stood before the assembled leadership, her crystalline form pulsing with the steady patterns that indicated formal address among her people. Colleagues, we are here to discuss a matter of critical importance to consortium security and the future of galactic civilization. Her voice carried through the chamber's acoustics with harmonics designed to convey absolute authority. Earth, the species we previously classified as a minor emerging civilization, has revealed military capabilities that exceed our collective strength by several orders of magnitude. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several species had suspected something significant was happening based on the priority communications traffic of the past 12 hours, but few had understood the scope of the revelation. How significant are we talking about? Asked General Vorthak of the Corvinite Military Command, his species' reputation for direct questioning evident in his blunt approach. Earth claims current deployment of 90,000 military vessels with 30,000 classified as primary combat units, Admiral Korath replied. For comparison, consortium aggregate military strength totals approximately 2,800 vessels across all member species. The silence that followed was the kind that happens when people realize their entire worldview needs immediate revision. Admiral Zareth of the Bashkir Fleet Command leaned forward, her mandibles clicking with agitation. 90,000 ships? That's impossible. No single species could maintain that level of military infrastructure without consortium intelligence networks detecting the construction. That was our initial assessment as well, Admiral Korath acknowledged. However, cross-referencing incident reports with locations mentioned by Earth's representative, we've verified substantial supporting evidence for their claimed capabilities. She activated the chamber's holographic display, showing a galactic map with incident markers scattered across known space. 17 separate military operations over the past 3 years, all officially recorded as minor peacekeeping actions or diplomatic interventions. In each case, hostile forces were completely eliminated with no reported human casualties and minimal collateral damage. General Vorthak studied the display with the analytical precision his species was known for. These operations span multiple sectors. The logistics alone would require massive support infrastructure. Precisely, and this represents only the operations we can verify through consortium records. Earth's representative suggested these were routine assignments implying much broader operational activity. Fleet Commander Zeph of the Juvrex Defense Corps activated his personal database accessing classified intelligence files. I'm reviewing psychological profiles and combat effectiveness ratings, if human individual combat capability scales with reported operational results. He paused, staring at his calculations. Commander, Admiral Korath prompted, if these assessments are accurate, human military effectiveness per individual soldier is approximately 800 times the galactic average. Commander Zeph's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. That's not evolution, colleagues, that's engineering. The implication settled over the assembly like a toxic cloud. If humanity had artificially enhanced their military capabilities, it suggested conscious choice, systematic development, and optimization for warfare on a scale that defied comprehension. What do they want? Asked diplomat Threx of the Zelrani Cultural Exchange. Her species had evolved specifically for negotiation and conflict resolution, making her question the most relevant one in the chamber. Admiral Korath activated another display showing the transcript of her communication with General Patterson. According to Earth Central Command, they want to help. Help with what? Galactic security. General Patterson indicated that Earth has been providing covert assistance with consortium security crises for several years, hoping we would eventually request formal cooperation. General Vorthak's tactical analysis was legendary throughout consortium space. Covert assistance implies they've been operating in our territory without authorization. That's an act of war. General, they've been eliminating threats to consortium civilian populations while ensuring we received credit for successful operations, Admiral Korath replied. If that's an act of war, it's the most benevolent one in galactic history. Fleet Commander Zeph accessed additional files, his expression growing more troubled with each data point. Colleagues, I'm detecting patterns in our recent operational successes that I hadn't noticed before. The Outer Rim piracy crisis that resolved so efficiently last year, the sudden collapse of the hegemony criminal networks, the mysterious disappearance of 3 separate slave trading organizations. Earth operations, Diplomat Threx asked. Almost certainly. And in each case, consortium forces arrived to find situations that had been prepared for our success. Commander Zeph's voice carried a note of professional admiration mixed with existential dread. They've been making us look competent while handling threats we didn't even know existed. Admiral Korath nodded grimly. General Patterson suggested that Earth has been hoping we would request assistance rather than continuing to operate unilaterally. Their preference is for formal cooperation rather than continued covert intervention. And if we refuse cooperation, General Vorthak's tactical mind was already considering worst-case scenarios. General Patterson didn't specify, but the implication was clear. Earth will continue to act in what they consider the galaxy's best interests with or without consortium approval. They would simply prefer to do so as allies rather than as— Admiral Korath paused, searching for the right term. As our de facto military overlords, diplomat Threx supplied. That's a diplomatic way to put it. Ear. The assembly fell silent as each representative contemplated what it meant to discover that their understanding of galactic power structures had been fundamentally flawed. They weren't dealing with an emerging civilization seeking membership in the galactic community. They were dealing with a military superpower that had been politely waiting for them to acknowledge reality. The message arrived during the night cycle, transmitted simultaneously to every consortium member world, and broadcast on all standard diplomatic frequencies with the kind of universal priority that hadn't been seen since the last galactic-scale emergency 3 centuries ago. It wasn't threatening, wasn't demanding, and wasn't negotiable. It was simply informative, delivered with the calm certainty of an entity that no longer needed to ask permission for anything. Attention, Galactic Defense Consortium Leadership. The transmission began delivered in the calm, professional tone that had become associated with Earth Central Command. This is General Patterson. Effective immediately, Earth is implementing enhanced security protocols for consortium space. Admiral Korath received the message in her private quarters, along with an attached data package that made her bioluminescent patterns shift through colors she hadn't known she could produce. Long-range sensor networks have detected massive fleet movements in the Andromeda sector. General Patterson's voice continued. Unknown configuration vessels, approximately 15,000 ships moving toward consortium space at significant velocity. Preliminary analysis suggests hostile intent. 15,000 ships. The number made consortium military statistics look like a rounding error. Earth forces are moving to intercept and evaluate the situation, the message continued. Consortium military assets are advised to maintain current positions and prepare for potential refugee assistance operations. We'll handle the direct threat assessment. Admiral Korath activated her communications system, opening a priority channel to Earth Central Command. The response came immediately, as if they had been expecting her call. Admiral Korath, General Patterson's voice filled her quarters. I assume you received our security bulletin. Juju, General, 15,000 hostile vessels represent a threat beyond consortium response capabilities. Do you require assistance? The pause that followed was brief, but somehow conveyed more information than words could have. Admiral Earth appreciates the offer, but this situation falls within our standard threat assessment parameters. We have sufficient assets in position to handle the evaluation and response phases. Sufficient assets? Admiral, are you familiar with the name Torres? Admiral Korath accessed her personal files, searching for any reference to that designation. I have no record of that name, General. Commander Torres is one of our tactical specialists. She's en route to the intercept coordinates with approximately 5,000 ships. Should be sufficient for initial contact and threat assessment. 5,000 ships sent as initial contact. Admiral Korath realized she was developing an entirely new understanding of what words like sufficient meant when applied to human military planning. General, if this hostile fleet proves to be beyond even your capabilities— Admiral, with respect, that's extremely unlikely. But in the highly improbable event that Commander Torres encounters something she can't handle, Earth has substantial additional assets available for deployment. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority transmission from Consortium Deep Space Sensors. Admiral Korath activated the secondary channel, maintaining her link with General Patterson. Admiral, this is Monitor Station Epsilon. The sensor operator's voice was tight with controlled panic. We're detecting massive hyperspace signatures throughout the outer sectors, multiple fleets all showing Earth transponder codes. Admiral Korath felt her crystalline structure begin to resonate with harmonics that indicated systemic overload. How many fleets? Admiral, we're counting at least 200 separate task forces. Each one appears to be substantial. She switched back to General Patterson's communication channel. General, your forces seem to be extensive. Admiral, Earth takes galactic security very seriously. We've been preparing for large-scale threat scenarios for some time. This situation provides an opportunity to test our rapid deployment protocols under actual operational conditions. How many ships are you deploying? General. Current operation orders call for approximately 40,000 vessels, but that's likely overkill. Commander Torres will probably have the situation resolved before the main force reaches the intercept coordinates. 40,000 ships as backup for a 5,000-ship initial contact force. Admiral Koreth was beginning to understand that humanity's concept of proportional response was fundamentally different from the rest of the galaxies. General, assuming this threat is neutralized, what are Earth's intentions regarding consortium space? Admiral, Earth's intentions haven't changed. We want to help. The difference is that we're no longer waiting for consortium leadership to figure out that you need help. The blunt assessment was delivered without malice, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. General, consortium leadership is prepared to discuss formal cooperation agreements. Excellent, Admiral. However, I should mention that Earth's terms have evolved somewhat since our previous conversations. Admiral Koreth's patterns shifted to deep red. In what way? Admiral, Earth is no longer interested in joining the Galactic Defense Consortium. We're interested in replacing it. The words hit like a physical blow. Replacing it. Admiral, with all due respect, the consortium has had centuries to establish effective galactic security. Piracy rates are at historical highs, territorial disputes are proliferating, and response times to humanitarian crises are measured in months rather than days. The current system isn't working. And Earth's alternative? Simple. Earth assumes primary responsibility for galactic defense and security. Existing consortium members maintain full autonomy over internal affairs, cultural development, and economic policies. We handle the military aspects of civilization maintenance. Admiral Koreth realized she was witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. And if consortium members refuse these terms, then they're free to maintain their current approach to galactic security, General Patterson replied. Earth will simply ensure that their failures don't affect species that prefer competent protection. The communication system chimed again with updates from the Andromeda intercept operation. Admiral Koreth activated the tactical display, showing real-time sensor data from the fleet engagement. What she saw redefined her understanding of what space combat could look like. Commander Torres's 5,000 ships had engaged the 15,000 hostile vessels in what appeared to be a coordinated ballet of destruction. Weapons fire that should have been visible from neighboring star systems erupted across thousands of cubic kilometers of space. It lasted approximately 40 minutes. When the energy signatures cleared, the sensor display showed 15,000 disabled alien vessels being towed away by human ships, with Torres's task force showing 0 casualties. Admiral, General Patterson's voice returned to the channel. Commander Torres reports successful completion of diplomatic contact. The invading force has agreed to return to their space and reconsider their expansion policies. Zur, diplomatic contact. Admiral, Earth prefers negotiation to destruction whenever possible. The hostile commanders were quite reasonable once they understood their strategic position. Admiral Koreth stared at the tactical display, watching human ships efficiently processing prisoners and salvaging disabled vessels with the kind of systematic precision that suggested this was routine procedure. General, she said quietly, I believe consortium leadership is ready to discuss Earth's proposals in detail. Excellent, Admiral. I'll have our diplomatic team prepare the formal agreements. Fair terms, full autonomy over internal affairs, and protection from external threats. I think you'll find Earth's approach to galactic governance is quite reasonable. Tart. And what does Earth get out of these arrangements? Admiral, General Patterson's voice carried a note of something that might have been weariness. Earth gets to sleep at night knowing that our children will grow up in a galaxy where the biggest worry is whether there's intelligent life out there, not whether that life is hostile. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Korath alone in her quarters, staring at tactical displays that showed the most powerful military force in galactic history, quietly ensuring that civilization could continue without interruption. 3 hours later, formal acceptance messages began arriving from consortium member worlds. Not because they particularly wanted Earth to assume control of galactic defense, but because the alternative was explaining to their populations why they had rejected protection from the species that had just eliminated a 15,000-ship invasion fleet without losing a single vessel. Within 12 hours, the transition was complete. The age of the Galactic Defense Consortium was over. The age of Earth's protective alliance had begun, and for the first time in galactic history, piracy rates began dropping towards zero. On Alpha 9 Station, a small plaque was installed beside the main conference chamber entrance. It read, "Do not ask an Earth Marine about their kill count. They can answer." Below that, in smaller text, "And if they do answer, you probably won't like what you learn about the galaxy you thought you knew." Sergeant Maia Voss returned to Earth 2 weeks later, her notebook filled with observations about alien military capabilities and cultural practices. In her final report, she noted that most galactic species seem to have trouble understanding the difference between having power and using it. "They mistake restraint for weakness," she wrote, "and preparation for aggression. Perhaps in time, they'll learn that the most dangerous species in the galaxy is the one that could destroy everyone else, but chooses to protect them instead." The galaxy had spent millennia believing that power came from the ability to destroy your enemies. Earth taught them something different. True power came from being so obviously capable of violence that nobody wanted to find out what would happen if you made them use it. And in the end, everybody was perfectly happy with that arrangement. What would you do if you discovered that everything you thought you knew about power was wrong? These are the stories that remind us that sometimes the greatest strength is the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. If these HFY stories resonate with you, there are many more tales of humanity's unexpected place in the cosmos waiting to be discovered. Like and subscribe to Join the Archive Voyagers as we explore the endless possibilities of human potential among the stars.